Then all of a sudden it abruptly stopped. And there was just this beautiful, just this bright light that interrupted everything. And the feeling of it, it's unexplainable. There's no words on this earth to appropriately explain to anybody's level of comprehension what that love and acceptance and warmth and welcome, what it felt like. The prisms of colors that are even beyond our own ability to see is magical. And I remember floating up and just feeling like I am home.
Welcome to a Broaderlands podcast. The opinions expressed on Broaderlands podcast are those of the guest speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views of the host or Broaderlands podcast. Kathryn, welcome to Broaderlands podcast. It's an honor and privilege. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. I look forward to learning from you. I love your insights. And you had a near-death experience as well, right?
I did, yes, at 17.
Wow. Maybe before we get started, maybe you could share a little bit about yourself and what you do, if you don't mind me asking.
Sure, absolutely. So about me, I grew up in a very tumultuous household. I like to kind of think of it. I was the scapegoat. I was the black sheep. My mother, although I am in no way qualified to give a formal diagnosis, her tendencies for covert narcissism is absolutely there. And I was the one that dared speak up about it. So I was the one that was basically crucified for having a voice.
Mm-hmm.
So at 17, I had my near-death experience, and I was sent back by my brother, who had passed away about 2 weeks before I turned 10 years old. And it was supposed to be my golden birthday, so I can't imagine what my parents were going through at that time. After all of that happened, I was put on very powerful medications for several mental illnesses I never had. And it was just purely because of her perpetual victimization complex and the fact that I would not bow down to the abuse that she was presenting. I absolutely rejected her narrative. And so I had my mind and my life stolen for over 2 decades. It got to the point where I was put on permanent disability through the Social Security Administration. And they testified that I would never be able to hold a job. I would never be able to have a normal life. I couldn't even manage my own finances. So I had to have a representative payee pay all my bills and give me like a little stipend every month. And so when I saved myself about 4 years ago, I went to see another psychologist for a med review, and I was not taking any medications at that time for about 3 weeks. And so he was the only one, Dr. Lipman in Vallejo, California. I don't know if you're still practicing, but sir, you saved my life. He listened, the only one in 21 years that listened. And when I was done telling him my story, he took off his glasses, set them on top of about 1.5 feet, 2 feet of paper, medical records of mine. And he said that he had gone through my entire file and he did not find one shred of evidence where I ever had bipolar to begin with.
Wow.
So so that really led to my entire transformation. At that point, about a couple months later, A few months later, I went no contact with my entire family, and I started healing. About a month after that, there was the COVID lockdowns. And about a month or two after that, I found out that the person that I had been sharing my life with for 4 years was having an affair. So I decided to choose homelessness over that toxicity. So basically, from there, I dug myself out and I focused on healing. And I started seeing all the gaps. And I started figuring out what's wrong. And instead of asking myself, well, why did all of these things happen? I switched my view, switched my perspective, and I said, with a system so broken and a family of multi-generational toxicity, why would it not happen? Instead of why did, ask yourself, why not? And so that really started opening the door to a lot of awareness. I read a lot of books. One of them, I'm still reading from Dr. Gabor Mate, The Myth of Normal. He's absolutely phenomenal.
It's my hero.
Absolutely, I would recommend it. It's just all those insights. It's one of those things where you're reading it and about 2 paragraphs in, there's just something so powerful that you have to put that down and just kind of digest it. So it's wonderful. And I realized out of all of this healing, living in my car for a few months, no job title, no family title, really, really nothing to my name. My perspective of that now is that was a gift. And it was only a gift because I had to find out who I was at my authentic core, who I was without any interference. And I found out, and really that is a powerful piece of knowledge. So after that, I decided to, figure out, okay, so if all of this is hurting, right? If all of this is hurting, if people aren't listening to who is in the chair in front of them, and if people are having a hard time even accessing all of these services, and the mental health, field itself is just drastically overwhelmed, how can I help? And it finally came to me one day in kind of a nature walk meditation. And that's where the idea of the Dawning Institute came from. Really just unifying the community, bringing together other professionals in, various fields and modalities, and having that one focus to help heal the community from, not only trauma, but other things. If the school system has failed us, because I don't know about you, I loved line dancing, when I was in school. That was fun. But you can't dance your way out of taxes. You can't dance your way into a budget. And so these are things that have been lost to our society through our educational system. And so, if you bring in financial planners or wellness planners, you're able to give people that gift of the knowledge and control and power over their money. They're able to understand what a credit score is and how it affects them, and how investments work, and what an APR is, and how to get a mortgage, and how to save, and how to, all of these things that you just aren't taught. And then we have, I have a Reiki person. I have somebody that's a Qigong master. I have a hypnotherapist. I have a nutritionist. I have somebody that does biofeedback and human design. And then I just got a couple of people in different states saying, I love your idea. I love what you're doing, but I don't live in Seattle. And so I figured, if a gift like this is dropped in your lap, I'd be crazy to deny them. So now I'm starting to put together a national network. of people, of like-minded people that believe that healing really is mind, body, and soul unification. And the beautiful thing is that my model, it allows people who don't necessarily have the income to afford healing, but that really need it, that want it, that are here for it. When they come through the doors, they're not going to get turned down. And it's a wonderful thing to witness people being able to not only face their demons, but be able to rise above.
Wow. I love that. In the 12-step community, they talked about hurt people, or I like to say traumatized people. But if you look even deeper, which I love what you touched on, was a sick system creates sick people, or a broken system creates broken people. It's there's something wrong. I mean, we're taught in the spiritual community to go within as individuals, but we also got to learn. Well, at least for me, I learned how to do it at a collective level as well. Thanks to Eckhart Tolle, helped bring awareness on that on his book New Earth, and I started learning about the collective and how it works just like the individual ego. It also works as a collective ego, and it gave me so much insight and understanding. Like it opened up a whole new door of awareness for me. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Tapping into the spiritual community, just getting away from the framework of organized religion. I grew up as a Lutheran, Missouri Synod Lutheran. So I kind of joke around that it's like a Catholic light, right? So basically we have all the liturgy and all the beliefs and all that of Catholicism, but we don't have all that, pomp and circumstance. So, it's one of those funny things where whether you're Lutheran, whether you're Catholic, you can look at somebody and you can say, peace be with you. And their response would be, and also with you. And it's like, that's how deep it goes, because just by those few words, right? But when I started tapping into spirituality, it was more than just, peace and love and God and hellfire and brimstone and all of that. It was shadow work and really looking at yourself, and finding the ugliness within and confronting it and understanding it. And that understanding has led to acceptance, and that acceptance has led to love. And so when you finally get through that, you can really see that there's just so many people out there that have been hurting. And the system itself is so broken, so overwhelmed. So it was really just a combination of things that led me to this healing.
I love that. And I always talk about how, for me, spirituality is taking responsibility for your own thoughts and your own actions and your shadow. You got to acknowledge the shadow and understand it. And the more I understand me and the different parts within me, the more I can understand others, and the more compassion I can have, and the less emotion reactive I could stop being with that awareness, if that makes any sense. You brought up the body, mind, and soul connection, and I love that. Because in the 12-step community, it says mind, body, and spirit. But Peter Levine talks about trauma, and you hear Gabor talk about it as well. Trauma is the loss of self. It's a disconnection of self. And then Gabor would so beautifully say, well, it means wound in Greek, but recovery means to get back. Healing means to get back to the self, our true self. At least for me, that's what it means. And my authenticity, my individuality, and the world no longer influences me like it once did. I get to choose and filter stuff out for myself, and that's been my experience. But going back to your childhood, I don't know if you would want to touch on that a little bit more and explain how trauma affected you and the importance as being a human being to work on ourselves, in your opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. So my trauma actually began in infancy. And it's astounding to hear when she would tell this story that she kind of laughed at it. So I was breastfed, and when I dared fall asleep while nursing, and I started to clench down, she would take her open hand and smack me against the face to get me to let go, instead of, putting her finger in my mouth and just kind of, getting me to unlatch. She would slap me. And it was about 3 years ago in a windstorm. I was getting out of the car, and all of a sudden the car door, there was a gust of wind, and the car door kind of came onto me, and one of the edges hit my cheek, and all of a sudden I started immediately breaking down and crying. And after maybe a second or two, I'm asking myself, where does this come from? It's only a door. It's only a windstorm. Where does this come from? And then I remembered the story that she was saying, that she was telling us. And I'm going, oh my God, that is a core wound. When you are only a few months old and you start getting hit for daring to fall asleep, that's a core wound. And then that opened the door to a lot of other realizations of, that's another reason why I have issues with insomnia, like why I can't go to sleep, because now sleep equals danger. And so I've been battling that for as long as I can remember. So yeah, the core wounds are something that, it hits you at a left field by that Mack truck carrying the ton of bricks. But once you're able to really just face that and you're able to work through it, I mean, it's pretty heavy. It's pretty heavy. And then it affects you through adulthood. And it didn't stop there for me. It went to, of course it escalated as I got older. To further physical abuse. And then my sister came along when I was 5, and she became the golden child. So the biggest, I guess you could say, the biggest example I could use is when I graduated high school, I got a dinner with basically just the 3 of us, because my father had left. Just the 3 of us at like a Denny's style restaurant. When my sister graduated 5 years later, she got a white Dodge Ram pickup truck, extended cab, and a horse. So that kind of tells you the inequality and the dynamics of a toxic household.
Do you know that you could look back? Do you see, I could see it in me when I look back, is how that created that voice in the head, that unhealthy voice in the head, or it fogged up your window of perception. It's like when we experience trauma, it seems like we automatically go into victimese. And or victim and in my adult life, at least in my adult life. And if I understand that I may have been a victim to certain circumstances, but I get trapped in that victimhood and it affects me in my later life. It's important to acknowledge that stuff, but don't get stuck in it because it made me sick.
It does. Yeah.
I heard you say something more beautiful on a talk, and I really appreciate it. You says, I'm no longer a victim and I'm no longer a survivor.
Yeah. So I looked at a few. But people like buzzwords. People like boxes. They feel safe in boxes. If they have a category that they can put themselves in, if they give themselves an identity, then that makes them feel a lot better. Oh, I'm a survivor of this, or, I'm a victim of that. And it really goes to the mentality of where they are in their stage of healing. So a victim is somebody that basically has this mentality of, this happened to me and therefore that's why I do that. A survivor said, this happened to me and I take ownership in it, and I'm no longer going to act in such a way as I am a victim, but I am going to rise above whatever happened, right? The third category, and this is where I put myself into, is the warrior. So I went from victim to survivor. And now I am using my voice to rise up just one more level and say, this is not right. I am going to do something about these issues. And because I come from a unique background, and part of my working history was being in the back office of medical offices. And I even managed a cardiologist office for about 4 years. I've worked at a military treatment facility. You know, I have this unique perspective. So not only was I a patient, but I was a, administrative medical professional. So I know where the gaps are. And I'm saying, this is what's going on. This is the reality. And now I'm going to do something about it. I'm going to speak up. I'm going to advocate for those that feel voiceless. Because by the time I'm done in this life, my goal is to make sure that no child ever has my story.
Well, I really appreciate your courage. It takes a lot of courage to stand up and speak your truth, and for the greater good of humanity. And that's the whole part of this podcast, broader lens, to help create a broader lens, to help us expand as a whole, and bring in beautiful minds and people just like yourself. So I really appreciate it. It's funny, you brought up black sheep earlier, and I was thinking in my head, like, who's the black sheep in my family? Like, we're actually all black sheep. I'm like, who's the white sheep? Oh, my sister Maria, she's the white sheep. But we have all black sheep in my family. It came from a family with a lot of collective trauma that no one wants to talk about, and it makes a family sick, and they don't even see it, And I love my family. I'm not talking about my family, but I could see it when you really have this awareness, like, holy shit. And no one, it divides the family. No one's talking to each other. Everyone's don't know how to talk about things, and it really makes the family sick when you can't, grow, because you're stuck in all that collective trauma within the family. So I'm more of the black sheep now when it comes to spirituality. You're like, what the hell is he talking about? What's he doing? Talking about your emotions. That's not cool. Where I come from, it's like, who got shot, who's in prison, who's strung out on the streets, all that kind of stuff. Who's going to the lowrider car show or the concert? And it's like,
Right.
that's the normal talk where it's like, but no, don't talk about your feelings, and I pushed that stuff down for a very long time, and I became really spiritually sick. If that makes any sense.
Exactly. Yeah. It's got to come out one way or the other, whether it's explosive anger or you turn into yourself and you self-sabotage, and you either destroy your body, you destroy your life, or you take your life. And that's the most tragic.
Gabor Mate, you brought him up. He's a hero of mine. I had his son Daniel on, and it was fun. It was like my second interview, and I was like all nervous. But yeah, Daniel was awesome. But also you hear like Bruce Limpton and them talk about how our thoughts can make us sick. If we have all these unhealthy thoughts and unresolved trauma, that can produce some form of disease later down the line.
Oh, absolutely. And not only does it produce disease, and I'm going to be a little additionally vulnerable. I looked up, a lot of these different criteria for how you score trauma and how you score resiliency and all that. So I have an ACE score of 6. And if you have an ACE score of 6 or above, so ACE is adverse childhood AC experience. Yeah, adverse childhood experiences score. And I believe it has about 10 questions or so. And if you have 6 or more, your life expectancy is basically cut by around 10 to 20 years. And then I took the resiliency score, where I was as a child when I was having all of that trauma. And there was about 30, 40-ish questions on that. And my score was a 2. 2. I'm looking at all of this, and I'm looking at this data that I was able to glean from years of research. Not only do I have, and this is statistically speaking, maybe about 20 to 30 years left on this earth because of what happened. And so I've got to make an impact now. This goes for everyone else. Now, the good thing is that you can start reversing some of that trauma, but it does take a lot of work. It does take a lot of effort. And really the trauma itself, the reason why the life expectancy is shortened is because it does damage not only to your system with the elevated cortisol over a long period of time, but it also does damage, I believe they said, to the DNA structure itself. So you're really just, if you can heal to the point where you can live a happy life, that's what I want for people. I want people to be happy. I see so much pain. And in Seattle, I walk down the street and there's a person on the street, in either a sleeping bag or something. And I feel compassion because I know what it's like to live in a mind that is ravaged by trauma. And it almost, when I really think about it, I start to get kind of misty-eyed that this is where our society has led.
Yeah, appreciate that. When I went back home recently in San Pedro, California, I was driving, and it's in Southern California, and I seen a Mexican guy all tatted up, ex-gang. Well, he's a gang member, but he's an addict, you can tell, and he's homeless, and he's pushing a little white lady, probably in her late 60s, and he's pushing her on a wheelchair. And then people, we're programmed just to drive by and look at them as like losers, or just become like they're not human being anymore. Gabor talks about the hungry ghost, and I appreciate that, his book. And
Absolutely.
but I got teary-eyed because I have so much compassion because I have that understanding, and I've worked on myself enough where I'm more in tune to the oneness of life, or the capital S self, that we're all the self, like the Hindus talk about. And it's hard not to have compassion. It's hard not to have that when you're connected, to self, in yourself and others. And I totally understand what you're saying. I wanted to ask you a question, because I heard you in an interview, and someone brought up personality. It's my personality, and you said it was unresolved trauma, and that's what I've gotten in my own observation, my own research, and my own experience. Being in the 12-step rooms for a long time, I was there for 14 years, and I would hear about step 6 and 7, which is character defects or shortcomings. I like the term shortcomings a little better. I don't like character defects, because then all of a sudden we're defective people. But it's really just unresolved trauma, trauma responses and behavioral patterns that we developed by not looking at the shadow. And a lot of times I think we miss it altogether, and have because we never really do deeper work, because just leave it up to God and he'll take it away. But we all know that's not going to happen.
Exactly. Language matters. What you say outwardly matters. What you say inwardly matters even more. And when you call yourself defective, how does that make you feel, right? It's not good. And so I don't really see people as defective. I see them as unheard stories, unheard souls. And we have a overabundance of unheard souls. People that have fallen through every gap and crevice. And, it's not the fact that we don't have services. It's the fact that people who dare to try to live their lives with their trauma are stigmatized. And it is It is the shame that people weaponize against those survivors who are just trying to survive, just trying to get through another day. That also needs to change. And, it was so ugly to try to talk to someone. And the moment they realized that I lived in the car, all of a sudden I was a pariah, that they might get something from me. I'll never forget how that made me feel. And I don't wish that on anyone.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Trauma responses. Can you help broaden our lens on what a trauma response is? Some people may not even have heard the term.
Sure. So a trauma response, you can kind of put it into fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. I had the response of freeze. So if someone would come at me in a very aggressive manner, I would freeze up. And there was a neighbor, this was years ago, back when I was living in California, and she came at me in a very aggressive manner, and I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. I couldn't do anything but stand there. And she got upset that I wouldn't say anything. I can't say anything because growing up, and here's the thing, growing up, if I dared speak up, the beating would get worse and it would continue. I learned that I needed to shut up and take the beating so that way it would be over with sooner. That is a trauma response. What is also a trauma response, and of somebody who is very new in their healing, somebody who has not done very much or gone very far, will explode on you sometimes over the smallest incidents. Let's say you are at the grocery store and you can't find the creamer that they want. And you call them up and you say, hey, I can't find this one, but here's an alternative. Would that be okay? And over the phone, they lose their nut. They start screaming. They start, having this response of visceral anger. That too is a trauma response. And so we are seeing a lot of it in our society. You see it on social media every day. You see people attacking strangers every day because of their uneducated judgments, because they have this need to be heard, because somewhere at some point they may feel like their voice was silenced, or they may feel like, they have this correct outlook and they need to put their judgment out on somebody else. Social media is beyond toxic. It is degrading our society to a point where I seriously don't know who we are anymore. We used to stand for something. And now we see kids saying, I'm going to end my life if you take TikTok away. It's an app on social media. I remember having to look through encyclopedias to get my, information for schoolwork, and there may be this generational disconnect. But this says something about this new generation, and I am really concerned about where we are.
Well, yeah, I appreciate it. I believe if you run for president, to run for president, you have to go through some kind of like shadow work, work on your healing, acknowledge your traumas. You should be doing some inner work and have some kind of form of mindfulness or spiritual basis that you're trying to live. I think that should be one of the main things you should have to be qualified to run for president these days, because we're electing all these sick people, and a lot of them are addicted to power. come from a lot of
Oh,
trauma.
absolutely. There was a report that came out that said most of America's, top 1% or whatnot has some sort of mental illness, some sort of
Mm.
psychopathy or something like that. And I'm reading it and I'm looking through it and I'm looking at the patterns. That's one of the things that for growing up, I had to find patterns and read the energy of the room to know if I was safe. So, I was following the patterns and I'm going, there might be something here. There might be something here. And they're just saying, in that article, the more, the more successful you are, the higher the probability, because they have the drive and the will to succeed. They won't give up. They, the tenacity, all of this. And I'm thinking that seems about accurate, however, I'm not going to be the one to basically say yes or no. That's not my place. But I do see some patterns and it is quite concerning.
Yeah, thank you. Before we move on, because I want you to touch on your near-death experience.
Absolutely.
I want to. Do you believe we all, being in this life experience, because a lot of times in the 12-step community, people don't believe they have trauma, but you got to have some form of trauma. If it's Gabor or Richard Schwartz, Dr. Richard Schwartz, or even Mark Lewis, they all. And I took the ACE test, by the way, thanks to Nadine Harris. She shed light on that for me, and she so I took it and I got 9.5. 9.5. And but yeah, but it's crazy. But do you believe everyone's going to experience some form? I don't think there's no walking out of this life experience without some form of trauma.
I agree with you. Yeah, there is not a single person alive that has not experienced some sort of trauma, whether direct or indirect. And even indirect, if you watch something happen to someone else, I mean, that can even be on the news. All right, you're watching a news story and all of a sudden you see something that just makes your soul curl. Indirect. Now, is a light form of trauma? Yes. Are you going to be able to get over it? More than likely. Will it affect you in every aspect of your life? Probably not. But yeah, you cannot get out of this life unscathed. So anyone from the highest functioning CEO to somebody who is living on the street, we all have some sort of trauma.
Wow, thank you. When you said that right now in my mind, I'm like, holy shit. Because I never even really thought about an indirect trauma through watching, because I know it produces a lot of fear, hatred to keep us in a lower vibration. At least that's how it creates sick people, especially the more you watch it and you become addicted to it, to those emotions that it's providing,
Yeah.
But to indirect trauma, I never even looked at it like that. But you're right. You're so right. And it's like, wow. And especially the more you watch it. And I know a lot of people that are addicted to the news. They need to watch it. And it's sickening, especially without awareness.
Oh,
Yeah.
exactly. I mean, and think about this. You get into a car accident. That's some sort of trauma, right? You weren't expecting it, came out of nowhere, get in a car accident. Hopefully it's not that bad. I was in something that was a little bad, but we all have it. You're walking down the street, you watch somebody, something happen to somebody. Indirect, didn't happen to you. You just witnessed it. Your house gets robbed. That's a violation. That's a trauma. Your car gets stolen. That's a violation. That's a trauma. It might be indirect because it's not directly, again, to you, but that is something.
Yeah, you're right. Especially if we don't really utilize any tools or some kind of form of mindfulness or spirituality, or even every religion carries spiritual principles. But if we don't try to apply that or have a community to talk to about this stuff and just hold it in, it makes it even worse. You're right. I really appreciate that.
Absolutely.
You had a near-death experience.
Yeah.
And I would love for you to touch on that in your guys' book that's coming out. Maybe you start with the book if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. So the book is called Death, and it's a collaboration of about 12, 13 authors who've put their stories together in this one book. And it's been such an amazing experience. Amira and Elle, who are the co-founders of the Near Death Institute, which I am the secretary for the board on, they have been absolutely just angels putting this work together. And so my chapter is entitled "The Phoenix is Not Mythology." And it really just touches on a few paragraphs of the backstory so you understand where it comes from, and then it goes into my near-death experience. So to give you kind of a visual, I was raised in Oakley, not Oakland, Oakley, California. We were about an hour and a half away from Oakland and San Francisco. So, there was a little confusion on that, but Oakley, it was once upon a time a bedroom community / farm town. So it was a smallish town. You got to know people. There were cows and horses grazing in the fields, and then there was subdivisions and shopping, centers and whatnot. But the night I died, it was just very typical. And I left my window kind of slightly open, hearing the cows and the horses grazing in the fields, a train every once in a while going by. It's very peaceful. And because of all the medications I was put on, I'm not sure if it was the abundance of all these prescriptions or the severe sleep apnea that I found out that I had about 10 years ago. But I remember I was dreaming, and then all of a sudden it abruptly stopped. And there was just this beautiful, just this bright light that interrupted everything. And the feeling of it, it's unexplainable. There's no words on this earth to appropriately explain to anybody's level of comprehension what that love and acceptance and warmth and welcome, what it felt like. The prisms of colors that are even beyond our own ability to see was magical. And I remember floating up and just feeling like I am home, like I am finally home. And it wasn't due to anything by my own hand. It was natural causes. I've never felt a love like that before. And I've never felt a love like that since. And I remember as I was floating up, I was taking my right hand and I just put it out towards the apex, thinking I'm just finally home. This life, this hellscape is over. And oh gosh, sorry. It was my late brother that passed. His voice came from the apex. We're talking maybe centimeters before I touched the light. And he said, "Go back, Dawn. It's not your time yet." My birth name is Dawn. It's it's the name my father bestowed upon me. And I had legally changed it in 2013 because it just never felt right. And I was severely bullied in school for it. So I fell backwards. Like the posters or, whatever you see from The Expanse, where the woman was falling backwards with her hands and arms and legs out in front of her. And I remember I was screaming, no, I don't want to go back. Just don't send me back. And I woke up. When I woke up, the breaths that I was taking stung my lungs. My joints were stiff. My heart was pounding out of my chest. And I was just trying to comprehend what just happened. And I realized, oh my God, I just died. And then I realized I was sent back for some reason, but I don't want to be here. I didn't want to be here. And I remember after I caught my breath and I kind of calmed myself from crying. Mind you, it was 2 or 3 in the morning at that time. And I went in to see my mom. She's supposed to be the one that's supportive and to love me through everything, guide me. And I went into her and I just tried to gently wake her up. I said, Mom, I just died. I don't know what happened, but I just died. And I heard Brother tell me it's not my time yet. And she told me to go back to bed. It was just a dream. You can't wake me up because I have school in the morning. I was completely dismissed. My experience was completely rejected. And no one believed me. But I remember. I've always remembered. And I didn't understand. I never understood until just about a couple years ago why I was sent back. And I spent over 20 years every morning when I woke up either angry or depressed that I had another day, that I wasn't back home. But now I realize why I was sent back. Now I know why I went through everything I went through, why I was given no choice but to be strong and survive. But it's obviously still painful to think about, knowing that there's a love out there that I can't touch. And I can only hope that when I'm able to open my office space, that I can be that love for other people.
Thank you. How would you describe that love?
All-consuming, all-encompassing. There's no judgments. There's no criticisms. There's no shame. It's absolutely, fully, and completely unconditional. And I think that's why, in fact, I know that's why I do not fear death. I do not fear the end. Apprehension of the modality thereof, of how it would happen. Sure, I keep my wits about me. Nobody wants to have a painful ending. But when my time comes, I am ready to fully embrace it.
Yeah, thank you. I share this a lot, so I won't share it, but I in detail. But I had a shared death experience with my father when he died, and he fell off the cliff. And it hard for me. It was hard for me to come forward with this for a very long time, at least with my family. I talked about it in the 12-step rooms when I was, I got sober and was asked to speak. I would bring it up, but after my awakening, a number of times I've been shown that death is an illusion. It's who I really am doesn't die. We all say we're all made in the image of God, but who actually really understands this, because we've forgotten this with this experience.
Mm-hmm.
So I love what you said, and yeah, it's very heart touching. I love your story, and I really appreciate it. Has your conception of source or God changed since then? Because being raised Christian, I'm sure it might have changed a little bit with the
Yeah.
judgment day and all that stuff. Did you have a
Yeah.
life review?
Actually, no. I
Okay.
didn't I didn't get that far. I didn't cross the apex. What it did bring me was an awareness that organized religion as we know it has good intentions, but it's off. There's none of this, as I said earlier, hellfire and brimstone. God is love. And, Jesus, as we know him, Middle Eastern Jewish guy, he embodied peace and he embodied love. And he was crucified for speaking up for it. He healed the sick and loved the homeless, fed the hungry. Almost the opposite of what we're doing now. And there's a lot of good that is happening in the world, and I do not want to could just brush that aside. There are so many social organizations that are doing, the love of, let's say, God, right, without being a religious organization. There are so many things within every religion that get things right. Namely, love each other. Don't judge each other. Help each other out. Community, unification, understanding. And we seem to have grown far apart from that.
Yeah, thank you. I agree with you. I agree with everything you said, and I always tell people I know friends that are missionaries, Christians, and they go like to India or somewhere, and I say, why don't you go with a different intention instead of trying to convert them to a Christian? Why don't you just eat with them and learn about their culture, learn about their religion? Don't go with those intentions trying to convert them to Christianity, because you can give them clothes and food, but there's still an underlying, motive. Just
Yeah.
go and just to love them for who they are, and stop trying to make them into your own image. And it seems like, and that'll be a difference maker. Just learn how to coexist instead of trying to make them to your own ego identity. And I believe there is some good in religion, but there's also a lot of negative stuff from the very beginning with religion as well, limiting beliefs and misunderstanding that creates wrong perception at a collective level. So I totally agree with you as well. And yeah, yeah, thank you. So do you believe in reincarnation since this experience?
Yeah. Yeah, I do.
You know what I love about people with near-death experiences is I feel like I can relate because of my awakening. It's you're so connected with source and life, and you can have more compassion with others because you can start to see that word namaste comes to life. The God in me honors the God in you, the divine that's within all of us, and that conscious separation it dissolves a lot more, and I'm not really controlled by that me, us against them mentality anymore. I still have this experience, but I have tools and I have awareness that helps dissolve that when it does crop up, if that makes sense. And I hear,
absolutely. There's a lot of, let's say, science minds out there that would absolutely poo-poo all of this. However, I find this very interesting. When I saw the relationship and I saw the pattern on this, Einstein himself said that energy cannot be created nor can it be destroyed. It just is. Let me ask you this. What is a cardiogram, right? EKG. It is the measurement of the electricity in your heart, right? How the heart keeps pumping.
Okay.
Electricity is energy, is it not?
Yes.
Now, you get, your ECG, you get your brain waves tested. That is a test for the electrical impulses within your brain. Electricity, again, energy. If your brain and your heart has electricity that can be measured, where does it go when you die? If energy itself cannot be created, nor can it be destroyed, it just is. Where does it go? It does not die. In that instance, we do not die.
I love that. I always go back to the Hindu analogy with the wave, the ocean of spirit or consciousness, and the wave does never dies. It looks like when it hits the shore, it's gone, but it goes back to the ocean of spirit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We are always here, and yet we are here physically for a limited time.
Yeah, thank you. So what would be the difference for you between spirituality and religion? Or is there a difference?
Spirituality is the acceptance of what is. Religion is, this is what you must do. This is who you must be to conform. Spirituality, in my understanding and practice, does not force conformity. It doesn't force anything. Religion, however, you have to memorize. You have to go through these rituals, whether it's communion or baptism or confirmation or anything like that. You have to conform, or you're an outcast. I remember growing up, because my mother's blind, being in vacation Bible school, she was offering to make sandwiches. Basic. She can do that. She did that for me and my sister all the time. But it was the other moms there that was judgmental and discriminatory, that told her, we've got it handled. And 3 seconds later, within earshot, mind you, she might not be able to see, but she can hear you, asked another mother to help make the sandwiches. How do you think that makes someone feel? And what does that say about the church itself? If they allow discrimination, blatant discrimination, to run rampant. That's not how you bring people in. And I remember seeing that when I was, preschool, kindergarten age. That's when I started questioning, if these people are like this, why do I want to be this way? I don't. And so I was always a little rebellious. But maybe that's because I saw the truth.
That's how I feel too. Growing, I remember going to a Catholic church and I would see Jesus bloody, and he had to die for you because you're a sinner. And like, I couldn't comprehend what that meant. It's my little brain. Like, I'm not good enough, so they had to murder him.
Right.
They had to torture him because of me. It never made sense for me. And God is love. Like, it doesn't make sense. So when you shared your experience, this unconditional love is like, Yeah. And then, because in Corinthians, there's a beautiful saying, love keeps no record. It's kind of contradicting itself. Right? God is love in John, the book of John.
Mm-hmm.
But, it's so, I don't know. I was always just confused with that stuff. So I really appreciate you and your message. Yeah. What would you call the purpose of life now?
That's different for everyone.
You're right.
My purpose, my calling is to take my pain and help people through theirs. My purpose is different than your purpose, which is different from your family's purpose. We each have our own role to play, whether we're aware of it or not. That's individual. But I fully accept my role. And that's my understanding.
Yeah, I love that. And the Dawning Institute, how did that come about? And I know you touched on a little bit, and what's its mission, if you don't mind me asking?
So its mission is to unify communities through body, mind, soul healing integration, while also filling the gaps between accessibility, affordability, and sustainability.
I love that.
I found a way to bring people together to create this fully collaborative environment and to really focus on getting our services out there in the community. And I do that by our outreach services and, our model itself. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. You just need to repurpose it for your own vision. And where I work right now, it is it's a rather large assisted living facility. And we have a salon owner come in, once, twice a week and, perform her services on our residents or for our residents. And I've been watching her work. She's such a sweetheart. And I'm, of course, processing all the payments. That's what I do. And it just hit me. Why can't I do this with healing? So I've seen that the market rate, now it's based on a salon, right? So I see that the market rate is about 20% or so, to rent a booth. What if I do 30%? And in order to get services out to the community, give my providers 1.5% off their rent for sliding scale, every sliding scale client that they see, and 3% off of their rent for every pro bono client that they see that week, to a max floor of 18%, which is just under market rate. So basically you go from, if you see absolutely no clients at pro bono or no clients at sliding scale, you'll owe at the end of the week 30% net. But if you do the maximum deductions, you're only paying 18%. That's how I put my passion into the purpose. That's how I'm able to bridge the gaps. That's why I say, if you want to come in and are serious about getting help and helping yourself, because here we give you a hand up, not a hand out. So if you are serious and you are sick and tired of being sick and tired, we're here.
And what type of services do you offer for different types of people and problems?
So right now, I have a hypnotherapist, a Qigong master, a nutritionist, biofeedback, as well as human design and Reiki. And I'm currently looking for a lot more. So whether you're into financial wellness, whether you're into physical fitness or light therapy, sound therapy, art or music, dance, anything that can really help a person heal themselves. If you're a counselor, if you believe in, helping to heal the person as a whole person, and that the segmentation of the mind is what's helping to further, let's say, the crisis that we're facing. Because right now, a broken system will not fix itself. The solution has to be innovative. And so that's what I bring, is the innovative solution to help bridge the gaps. It's not to overtake, mind you. There's so much good that is being done currently. It's to help supplement.
I appreciate that. Yeah, there's always room for growth and change for the better. And I always say that in the 12-step communities, to stay open to new information, because a lot of the stuff comes from 1939 with the 5 to 10% success rate, and that's being generous. There's always room for improvement, but right now there's a big argument for any kind of change. So I hope people start to wake up and realize that there's always room for improvement. A lot of times in the 12-step community, they blame the newcomer for not getting it because they can't get honest. But it's so much more than that. I mean, they could pass a lie detector test and say that they really want help, and that's being honest, but they can't do it because they're stuck in their traumas or their conditioned state of being. So it's so much more. So I appreciate you.
Absolutely. And, there's people there that are just so judgmental. I've been to quite a few meetings myself, and I had a sponsor. It was Overeaters Anonymous. And I had a sponsor, and she actually had the audacity to tell me that I was not abstinent unless I got off of all of my medications. She's not a doctor. She has no right or place to tell me to get off of medications. That could be highly dangerous. And so, yeah, there's a lot of flaws. There's, for all the good that it can do, there's a lot of harm that can also happen.
That's not being looked at, so I appreciate that. And OA, they work out of the book Alcoholics Anonymous.
They do.
And to tell people they have an allergy to the body, which there's no such thing as far as modern science. It was debunked in 1944 by Howard Haggart at Yale University. I think there's improvement to not to put anyone down, but to have a deeper understanding of what's really wrong. Like Gabor Mate says, not why the addiction, but why the pain.
Absolutely. Then, there's another point that came across, is that a lot of people who are addicted to substances, whether it's drugs, alcohol, food, even toxic behaviors, it stems from pain. They are choosing to use either these substances or these behaviors because it brings them momentary peace, momentary happiness, and they are chasing that happiness because they're in so much pain from whatever happened in their life that they choose to put their bodies through that, their lives through that, in order to get a little glimpse. And that in and of itself is tragedy. The war on drugs, might as well call it a war on traumatized children.
I love that. Thank you. You're right. Totally right. And I love what Gabor, you talked about the myth of normal in his book. There's on the top paragraph, on one of the pages, he asks the question, and I'm going to paraphrase it. Is alcohol addictive? Yes or no? Is food addictive? Yes or no? Is shopping or work addictive? Yes or no? And then he goes on to say the answer is embedded in the question, depending on the amount of pain one needs to soothe. So, I really appreciate that. And I appreciate your time. And about your book, Death, when does that come out? Is that published already, or?
That comes out on Amazon on the 21st. So next Thursday, from this recording. So March 21st, you'll be able to order it on Amazon. We currently have pre-orders going on for the hardcover copy of the book. As well as if you pre-order on or before, I believe it's the 15th, you can have your name printed in the acknowledgments. So I actually have a link to that on my website, dawninginstitute.com. So you can check it out and see what I'm putting together. Check out my service providers. maybe, send them an email. Hey, I'm interested in what you're doing. I'm sure that they would really appreciate that. But yeah, death is going to be available and being mailed out. It's available for order on the 21st, being mailed out on the 22nd, 23rd.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate you coming on, and it was honor and a privilege to have you on with all your insights and wisdom. So I appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate your time as well.
I'm going to read something. I opened it up from Richard Schwartz, No Bad Parts, and I just opened the page, and it just came right to me, and I think it aligns perfectly with you. So, excuse my reading. I'm not the best reader. I literally had to learn how to read in my adult life. But it says, "When you can love all your parts, you can love all people. When your parts feel loved, they allow you to lead your life from self with a capital S. And you feel connected to the earth and you want to save it from the exploitive parts of others. You will expand the field of self with the capital S on the planet, and that will contribute to healing it. You will also feel connected to the bigger field of self. When you can love all your parts, you can love all people. And I hear that in you, and I really appreciate your time and your work that you do. So thank you.
That was a beautiful reading. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, thank you, and take care.
Thanks, you too.
Namastizzle.
Namaste.